to the right as well.
Once in a lifetime.
My name is Pam Mitchell. I'm the president of the Williamson County League of Women Voters. For those of you who don't know much about the League, let me take a moment to share with you a little bit about our core principles. So the League is a nonpartisan organization that grew out of the suffrage or the voters movement, and ultimately resulted in women gaining the right to vote. In 1920 for white women, and much later, 1965 for women of color, with the passing of the Voter Rights Act. I promise there won't be a quiz on this later. The League of Women Voters has a national organization, a state organization, and local organizations. In 1957, the League of Women Voters developed an education fund, and this was in recognition of an emerging branch of the League that was taking more positions on issues that were being debated by the public. So there was a need to have a firewall of sorts between those things that were historically League focused, which did things like voter education and nonpartisan information, and things that were more positional and debatable. So the education fund is intended to make sure that we've got a good line of demarcation between what's voter services, which is the nature of this event today, and what is actually positional. Prior to 2019, the Williamson County residents were covered by the Austin League. And then in 2019, me and a couple of my friends decided that this would be a really good opportunity for Williamson County. And in fact, we felt like Williamson County is unique enough from Austin that it really deserves to have its own league. Interestingly, the first president of the Texas State League of Women Voters actually was from Georgetown. So some of you may know the name of Jesse Daniel Ames. If you want to go by our house, it's actually 2 blocks south of the Old Town Downtown Square. And it's there's a family living in it now. It's beautifully preserved, and there's a wonderful bit of history there. In 2020, as president of the Williamson County League, I have 2 objectives, and I want to share those with you because I think it's important. One is about voter services, voter information, voter guide, and all the discipline that we put behind making sure that that's an objective document that allows you as voters to get the information you need about who the candidates are, what the issues are, and vote. To put it very inelegant, help me say that. That word. Yes. To say it the way I'm going to say it is, I don't care who you vote for, I just want you to vote. And the more informed you are, the better it's going to be. So that's kind of the net of goal number 1. And goal number 2 is to grow the membership. We want to make sure that the League of Women Voters represents the community of Williamson County. Men and women, young and seasoned, liberal and conservative. We want to make sure that the membership is reflective of the people that we serve. On the tables, there are 2 pieces of information. Actually 3 pieces of information. One is information about upcoming election, key dates, and a couple of forums that the League is facilitating. One is for GISD candidates, and the other is for this Georgetown City Council District 7 race. That QR code will take you to the website, which will give you the dates and the Zoom information if you're interested in participating, or you can just go to the website. And then the third piece of information is something Susan will share with you in a minute. Before I engage in the daunting task of introducing today's speaker, I want to thank the Anna and Anton Olson Legacy Fund for its generous support of today's event. So we wouldn't be here if it weren't for the support from that fund, and so thank you, Larry Olson, for that. I also want to thank Cass Wheeler, who I got to meet today, but we've been talking on and off for the last 2 months, and so appreciate all your assistance. It is my sincere pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Susan Combs. Born in San Antonio, she received her law degree from UT Law School in Austin. She's the author of Texas Tenacity, a memoir available on Amazon, by the way. A rancher who manages a 140-year-old family ranch in West Texas, and the mother of 3 sons, and I'm informed are very tall as well. that in and of itself, I just had to sit down and rest for a minute before I went on. Ms. Combs has been a public servant to the great state of Texas and the nation for nearly 30 years. And most recently, she was appointed by the former President Trump as the Assistant Secretary to the U.S. Department of the Interior. Prior to that, Ms. Combs was the 37th Comptroller of Texas, where she established an education metric for all public schools. It was after leaving that office that she launched the Texas Smart School Initiative, a topic we'll hear about more in a minute. Ms. Combs is the first woman to serve in the Texas Agriculture Commission. She also served as the chair of the Women's Suffrage Centennial Commission, a commission that obviously was responsible for the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, and she's a fellow at the University of Texas Center of Identity. Now, before I exhaust my fine audience here with Susan's awards and publications, I will stop. I want to thank all of you for coming out today, and thank you, Susan, for your time.
Yeah, I used to be taller. I was a couple inches taller, and my kids are all taller than I am, and so I would scare people when I would talk about, we're a very tall bunch of people. Pam, thank you so much. Thank you, Lee. I'm glad to be here. It was interesting driving up 35 and Mopac, and I want to tell you, I followed all safe speeds, more or less. Just don't want to get caught in the fib. I looked at this. I was really happy to be asked here today. This is for me to talk about Texas Smart Schools, an objective, data-driven tool to evaluate any school district's performance. And I want to talk a little bit about how I kind of came to getting interested in education. But the main thing is, this is a tool for you to use. This is a tool for any person, any place, to go online and make their own set of comparisons. I truly believe that each and every school can make changes for the better. And when you see what some other school districts can do, I certainly believe in emulating, and imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. You can find out if somebody's doing something really nifty. And so there's some pages out there. We'll come back to those in a minute. It's 6 pages. It's 2 pages of what Texas Smart Schools is, and then there's a piece on Round Rock ISD, piece on Georgetown ISD, and I'll tell you how I came to pick those. But what I want to really talk just generally about is schools are so important. Every one of you in this room, whether you have a child in the school district here, it's very, very important for this community. It's important for Williamson County. It's important for all of us to ensure that we have the very best educational opportunity for the kids. And so I want to talk a little bit about how I first got interested in it. I was an assistant DA in Dallas County, and I handled 2 populations. One was on the criminal side, I prosecuted juvenile delinquents, and on the civil side, I handled child abuse cases and saw children that were very much abused. And what really sort of prompted my inquiry was, as a prosecutor, I was given a pre-sentence report for each young individual. And what I noticed was they had the educational attainment. You'd have a 14 or 15-year-old kid, and this is Dallas, that was reading at the 4th or 5th grade level. And that was awful. I mean, it was pre-sentence report, kid after kid after kid, and then you'd see the same thing show up in some of the analysis about the abused and neglected children. And that information had real life consequences for these kids. If you're 15 and way back behind you is the 4th grade, it's all you've got, you're not looking at a very bright future unless you can change that pattern. And that's so important. So that was in the late 70s. Then I was elected to the legislature in 1992, and in 93, as a freshman legislator, I was on the Criminal Justice Committee. We were looking at juvenile justice reform, and I've always been interested in data. Running a broke ranch, you pay a lot of attention to nickels and dimes and pennies and 40-year-old barbed wire. I was looking at how did we assess the money that we spent for education, what did we get for it? Was there some perceptible link? So I asked TEA, Texas Education Agency, this was in the spring of '93, I asked them for a list of all high schools in the state with a lower than a 40% passing rate on math. Lower than 40%. I expected to get not very many. Took TEA quite a while to compile this, and I kept pushing, where's my stuff, where's my stuff? If you're a freshman legislator, you think you're pretty smart. So I kept pushing, and I finally got it, and it was pages. It was pages of high schools with 40% or lower passing rate on the math. And I thought that was awful. So when you're a House member, you can copy anything, have it copied by the House sergeant, and put it on the desks. So I put this out for 150 people to see it on the desk in the legislature because this information was not readily attainable. And so it was out there, and I just said, well, look at this. Well, it didn't produce much result. And I thought this data was not commonly seen, but it needed to be. And as a Texan, I say that as a Texan, from the Big Bend, from San Antonio, now in Austin, we're a big state, we're an important state. I thought it was important to get that out. I wrote a basic report card bill, a basic education report card bill at the time. I thought it was important. It didn't go very far, and the results that I got back from TEA later were, 18 months later, were not useful. So then new career, I ran for the office of Agriculture Commissioner. And that was a lot of fun. I did enjoy that. And I did things like hand out blue combs. I mean, because if you got a name Combs, you want to hand it out. It's very memorable. And so what was interesting then is I was connected to Marathon, Texas. Marathon used to be big, like 700 people. Now Marathon has shrunk and it's about 480, 500. But as Ag Commissioner, I went to all of these rural communities, and the difference of what their opportunities were. Harder to get teachers in some cases, harder to get resources. Of course, this was pre-online, etc. Wasn't much of that. Distance made their costs rise. And so I got to thinking about, we're going to have to at some point have an apples to apples kind of comparison because Marathon or Beloved is not Houston. And so you can't put them in the same box in a sense. You got to put them in cohorts or groups. And so I began thinking about that. I also was aware that we were seeing a lot of kids in rural areas for poverty reasons, not necessarily going to a four-year college, but they needed post-high school something. They needed a certificate, they needed training, they needed something. So they were doing welding, which is actually a very high-paying job, and plumbing, and lots of things. And I paid a lot of attention to what their educational level was. At that time, back then, the state would put in the T1 lines, which was a very good way to get hospitals, clinics, schools, and government buildings on a T1 line, and then you could pull information off. And that was, I forgot what the name of that was, but it was very, very good, and it's been used. So because the school districts were so different, it made for a messy statewide picture. You were going to get anomalies of information that wouldn't make much sense. So I then, when I became comptroller, I was elected, one with more columns for that one, then I knew a woman named Lori Taylor. Dr. Lori Taylor is a well-known educational analyst in economics, and I worked with Lori to start the first iteration of Texas Smart Schools was called FAST, Financial Allocation Study Texas. So Lori is the head of the Public Service and Administration Department in the Bush School of Government at Texas A&M. And she has National Education Finance Academy has named her a Distinguished Fellow of Research and Practice. She spent 14 years as an economist and policy advisor in the Research Department of the Federal Reserve of Dallas. She's widely recognized, and so with respect to getting this information together, she and I laid out some sort of basic principles in order to get to a useful tool. A, of course, the information had to be solid, it had to be testable, it had to be verifiable. Secondly, you had to have rational comparisons. What Lori wanted to put into it as well was cost for result. And we wanted to take a look at, what were you getting for your money if you were a high-paying school district per student, what were you getting in low-paying? So we did not feel, unless we went apples to apples, I think it would show bias, it wouldn't be very useful. And so she had a great team at A&M that looked at each and every school district, every campus across the state, consistent with FERPA, the federal education ruling, and you can't expose a particular child's stats, but you can do it in groups. And the goal that I had was that we would have schools compared with similar challenges, similar demographics, similar everything, so that you could see, look at that school, they did a fantastic job. I want to go imitate them because it would be publicly available data. How did you do that? How did you manage to just knock it out of the park? That was the goal. And we also hoped that we would be able to see leadership in the school districts learning more from the data, how to create better educational outcomes and find solutions. And I cannot stress how important leadership in public education is. And that means the school board, the administration and staff, and then with input from parents because they care, as well as the community. And I mean leadership at all levels that says we're going to together put our shoulder to the wheel to make things better. And the hope was that they would learn from each other, see the comparative data, and knowing that they were similarly situated would prompt questions, prompt analysis, to generate improvement. And so I hoped, as I said, that they would learn, model, copy, and change their approaches where necessary. The Texas Smart Schools is a research-based, value-added measure. This is important. It's a research-based, value-added measure of student gains on the Texas Accountability Instruments. Well, what are the Texas Accountability Instruments? There are two of them. The STAR exams and then the end-of-course exams. And so what you want to see is this value added measures the extent to which schools or districts exceed expectations. These expectations are based on the student's own prior performance and many demographic characteristics. So we expected the school to do maybe a little up. Oh my golly, it went way up. That's great. Or we expected the students to go a little up and they went the other direction. Whoops. And so that value added, you're trying to take a look at what can we do to get our understanding, our lenses clear enough to know how to help kids. And what Texas Smart Schools does, it's a resource that helps school districts see the possible. That's really important, to see what is possible. All too often, districts claim that they can't be expected to achieve great things with their limited resources or demographic challenges. Texas Smart Schools removes those excuses by helping districts see the possible of other districts in their similar worlds. That is why the apples to apples is so important. And that's why my example of Marathon versus Houston, well, obviously you don't get anything relevant out of that. The Texas Smart Schools methodology, I believe, provides the best possible measure of a school or district's contribution to student achievement because it focuses on the value added by the school. And value added is the gold standard for measuring a school's contribution to student learning. And the value added is widely used in the economics of education literature. Value added, and I'm sort of continuing to focus on this, those measures aim to identify how much more a given school or district students learn than what would be expected based on how much other similar students learn with other schools or districts. And so I would argue that these are valid comparisons, and they isolate out and make visible real trends. And in identifying best practices, it's both important and hard to do. It's really important and hard to do. Dr. Taylor developed her algorithms. She vetted them outside the state. Tweaks have been made, and she's gotten some national recognition. Eric Hanishek, who's at the Hoover Institution at Stanford, he's one of her big fans, and he noted rather cogently, I guess I would say, I like that word, that he referred to this work as something introduced into Texas education, a simple but subversive idea. The efforts to inject into the public debate transparency about the results each school district gets for their spending. No other state has shown the courage to have such public transparency. It's gotten great reactions from universities around the country, and it is important. So also what Texas Smart Schools does, which is unusual, it pays closer attention to relationship between student performance and limited language proficiency. Why is that important? We're welcoming a lot of people in this state who may not have English as their native language, and we want to see sort of how can we help them. You can, when you use the Texas Smart Schools, you can use an optional cohort. If you plug in Marathon ISD, you'll see a bunch of other schools in this green grid, and they have been selected because they are similar enough. Even if they're 150 miles away, they're still out in the boonies, they're not, near a metroplex, but you can also do your own. And by the way, TEA's assessment of student growth does not adjust for poverty, which we think is an important measure because it really does make a difference with your income and financial outcomes. But the similarity in these cohorts is based on characteristics that drive differences in the cost of education. So it does depend on kind of how you spend your money. So let me ask you, here's a big question. Why should we in this room care if what we know about our kids and their educational achievement? I'll give you some business reasons. Cold-blooded business. Helps project the future economy of the state, and I say that as a former CFO for the state of Texas, treasurer, tax collector, evildoer all around. Just kidding. But the point is, it does project the future economy of the state. Companies pay a lot of attention to what's the workforce like? Are they trained? Why would they come to Austin? Why would they go to, they're not going to go to American, I mean, we might like them out there, maybe they would help us get some rain, but they'll take a look. The real estate values, as I think many of you know, always follow good education. Realtors will tell you that home buyers almost inevitably ask about graduation rate, which is not necessarily a useful number compared to objective data. They will have quality of schools, and they'll buy in a good school district, and they may opt out of one with declining educational attainment. And there's a fiscal issue as well. Taxpayers want the government to perform well and bring value for the dollar. And the good information that you get by Texas Smart Schools can lead to real and positive outcomes for the individual student. This is a real indicator, and local residents hopefully are looking at results and getting involved to make things better. And I had confidence in this information. I don't know of anybody who doesn't have confidence in this. This is called positive analysis. Let me get this definition of positive analysis. It is the state of what is. It's the state of what is at the school. You see what is the actual level of student improvement. And positive analysis uses scientific principles to arrive at objective, testable conclusions. I believe whether you're running your business or government, you have to study yourself. Whatever the you is, whatever entity it is, whatever organization it is, you have to study it. And then you will see gaps. It takes leadership to do this. It's a kind of a frightening thing sometimes, but but you have to look at yourself in order to see where you really are. You won't know about the gaps, you won't know about the holes, you won't know about the areas you need to improve if you don't do this kind of introspection. And if we fail to do that for any kid, any place in the state, we're failing the kids. Our intellectual rigor and the rigor applied to the data, these are both powerful tools to improve education and therefore the outcomes for all students. So, what's the goal of education for kids? Now, I told you the business reasons we all ought to care. Well, we hope that their education prepares them to be successful adults, that it engages their minds, that it improves on their talents, helps them learn critical thinking, and prepares them for a global workforce. If we fail at the K through 12 range, then these children will, to some degree, have to go through remediation. That is very discouraging to the student. It is time-consuming. It's a huge waste of money because it wasn't done right the first time. And you have to pay again for the education that should have been done. And ultimately, of course, it is incredibly unfair to the kids. I hear sometimes that people don't think we should have tests or that the data is flawed. Well, I disagree, and that's why I'm so happy to be asked to come here, explain what I really believe is at stake. The key is for this kind of objectivity, of basic analysis, to be the right lens without bias. I mean, that's the point. You can't fudge your numbers. You shouldn't fudge your data, and you shouldn't be afraid of numbers. I encourage you to work with this website on your own. You can create any group you like, or select a school district, and it will show you a group of demographically similar, economically similar schools. It's a useful reference point. And also, the methodology is laid out in the website for you to take a look at how did they do this. And it's a really nice little website. Got good colors. It's kind of perky. Remember the Texas Smart School. I like perky colors. Come on. The Texas Smart Schools for everyone. And so I want to give you a little example about, I've been quoting America. And by the way, it's America. Kind of keep your teeth together and kind of talk like that. It's not America. It's America. All right. So they today, according to my new friend, Pete Price, the superintendent, have 59 kids, K through 12. That's tiny. So they had some adverse educational data some years back, and they got a big whoops. They said, whoop, we got to fix this. So they started fixing. They got a new superintendent who was great, and they had some financial issues. They fixed all of those, and there began to be this little upward rise, upward rise. So I just talked to the new superintendent. They're going to go out to school in about 10 days. They're now above 54% of all of the rest of the school districts in the state on student performance improvement. They have pulled their socks. And by the way, Dr. Price, poor guy, he does not have a principal. He does not have a counselor. He is it. I do not believe he is taking to cooking yet. I think that may be in his future. But he is working like a dog. They are now an early college high school. Their students can get an associate's degree from Odessa College along with their high school diploma. They offer a welding program certification. 11 students participated in the Big Bend History Fair. All of them are going to the state finals. They're really punching above their weight. And the kids participating in a cowboy poetry contest. Just listen, Marathon is doing great stuff. I didn't want to say anything stronger. They're doing great stuff. What he told me, he said, what we do is we have so few kids that if a child fails on something and it's one of three, that's a 33% hit to your numbers. He said, we can't afford that. Every single day is an intervention. Every single day they address each kid, they study the information on each child every single day, because you let one slip, you look terrible. They have saved some money. They are using federal dollars to partner with various federal networks to get a needs assessment. They're getting a third-party perspective so that they can then get some help in making changes. They follow the data and it illuminates their blind spots. Everyone in the community has an interest in public education, and these students and the future of our economy rests on a strong educational grounding. You all heard this phrase, as the tide rises, so do all ships. That's really important. We can't leave anybody behind. I literally want each and every child to achieve the utmost of their potential, and public schools can and should be the launch pad for their dreams. Being interested, being involved, and willing to really look at your school is, in my view, the hallmark of a successful society. Texas is the only state with this amazing resource, and it can be very helpful and honest assessment. Unfortunately, some states hide information from parents, and parents are increasingly concerned about, am I really understanding what's going on at the school? So engaging with each other is a good thing. And I would also argue, don't be afraid of a bad score. View it as an opportunity to change course to a better outcome. Use it as a learning experience. You don't want to go down, you want to go up. So I'll get to the 6 pages here in a second, but I want to tell you what I did. Is I looked at all 9 public schools in Williamson and Travis County. And so I just plugged them all in. So let me tell you what the SMART score is versus the academic performance. SMART score is really, up on this side on the left is the student academic improvement on the left. On the bottom is the spending. Cheap on the right, expensive on the left. So if you're way over to the left, you're spending a whole bunch of money. You may be up high, which means you're getting pretty good stuff, or you may be down low on performance and maybe medium for spending. So it's kind of a crosshatch. Austin ISD is a 2.5 SMART school out of its maximum of 5. It has average academic performance. So they're greater than 57% on academic performance of all the rest of the school districts in the state. They're expensive though, $9,400 per pupil spent. So that's why their SMART score is kind of down here because it's very expensive, and they're only at 57%. Eanes has a 3.5 SMART score. They're 96%, they're above 96% of all of the school districts in the state, but it's very high spending, $9,466. Del Valle has a 3 SMART score, but they're very low academic. It's 25% only is below them, and they spend $9,400. Georgetown has a number 2 SMART score. They're only above 2% of all of the school districts in the state in academic performance. They are labeled very low academic performance, and their spending is $8,620. Hutto has a 3.5 SMART score. They're above 56%. I told you Marathon's at 54, so Hutto's at 56, and they spend $8,400. Lake Travis is a 5. Lake Travis is a 5. But they have 84 below them. They're very high academic performance, and their spending is amazing. It's only $7,000. Leander is a 4.5 SMART score. They're high academic performance. They're not very high, they're high, and they're above 78% of the school districts. And their spending is at $8,000, which is on the low side. Pflugerville is a 3 SMART score. They're above 56%. They're average academic, but they spend a lot, $9,100. And last is Round Rock. It has a 4.5 SMART score. Very high academic performance. They're above 88% of all the other school districts' student performance in the state. And they have $8,000 in spending. Now, you can do this yourself. It's kind of the colors are pretty, you can look at it. But I picked 2, and I picked the two in Williamson County. So I had Round Rock in there, and then I had Georgetown. Round Rock is better than 80 on academic. It's better than 88% of all the school districts in the state, and Georgetown is only better than 2. They have relatively similar demographics. Yes, there's more students at Round Rock, about 50,000, and there's about 12,000 at GISD, but I was taken aback by the school performance number. I was pretty surprised. I haven't dug into it. I'm just giving you what's on the website, but I think it should prompt some questions. And it should be critical, I think, for those who are interested in education to do look at it. And to be receptive to whatever you find so that you can fix it. I really do believe that failure for our kids should not be an option. I think eye-opening numbers should be a wake-up call. And everybody can work to turn things around. Businesses, by the way, businesses routinely use data to drive changes in their business practices. And they get outsiders, they get consultants, they find out, because sometimes it's hard for you to see yourself. And so you get somebody else to give you an unvarnished, third-party look. Governments do it as well, and it's smart. I did that in looking at convenience stores sales tax. I got some third-party investment, and I found out that I could recapture about $600 million in paid in but unremitted. That means 2 sets of books. Paid in but unremitted sales taxes, because I use data mining. I routinely urge governments to open their doors to outside experts because you get a different lens that allows you to test all of your assumptions, all of your theories. Promises made by businesses or government, either, that are made about outcomes have no value until proven and supported by external objective data. I can promise my kids I can make a lot of things happen, and if it didn't happen, there was no external data except that mom didn't drive us someplace. Now is the time to really reassess and evaluate, use the data. This tool allows parents and individuals to find out which schools are beating expectations. That's exciting. If somebody is beating expectations, that's a hubba, that's wonderful. Educators can find peers whose success makes them worth emulating. This is a positive, and I hope it's viewed that way by everybody. Call the top schools and talk to them. What are you doing? Wow, this is neat. I'm so thrilled. Can we meet and have coffee? So yes, I do believe in data and driving accountability and driving change and pointing the way to solutions for those great kids. Thanks for letting me come here and speak today. Showed up here, you're interested, and I think you want to ask questions or tell what you know. I see a hand.
I've taught in 4 different states, but unfortunately not Texas over my career. Could you be a little more specific in the accountability, what goes into grading schools?
It's in it's
STAR at the end of the course. Are those the only 2?
Sorry, I may not have heard everything, but let me just, you asked about accountability.
Could you be a little more specific on what goes into
Well,
that?
so I also would refer you, since I'm not a PhD, my friend Lori couldn't be here today, but Texas itself, the education agency, makes schools use 2 accountability tests, the STAR and then the end of course. So everybody takes the same stuff, and so it's not your graduation rate, which can be untied to that. These 2 tests everybody takes, and so you have a similar input. And then what Texas A&M does is that they then group those in cohorts similarly situated. But the accountability test is the data that the state already has. What the state doesn't do is put it together with costs, etc. So that's one thing that Texas Smart Schools does. It links it to spending. So the money on the bottom right, cheap over here, expensive over here, and so if you're way over the left, but you're way up high in student performance beating expectations, then you've actually got something pretty good. It's an interesting website. Texas Smart Schools, as I said, it's been widely ranked and peer reviewed across the country, and universities all over really like it. The interesting thing is we tie it to money, because that's sometimes we always want to know, if we pay for something else, will we get something for it? And that's why you see this number. Now, the economics on it they cover a lot of things. Please go refer to the website, it'll tell you all of the spending you can use, that is plugged in, some spending is not plugged in. I just didn't wanna go through it right here, but it's on the website, it tells you what are the things they consider in the spend. Is that useful at all?
Yeah,
It's called www.texassmartschools.org.
well, some states have, when they're ranking, if the kids are making progress or not, one of the first things they look at is, in the school testing, how many kids are participating? Because, some places you have to have like at least a 95% participation rate to get credit for that. I just wonder,
I don't-
make sure everybody took.
I'm sorry, I don't have the answer. Somebody in this room may know that. I don't have the answer to that. I see a person with a light bulb.
Me?
Yeah.
TDA has a whole different set of accountability, and it does look at, it breaks it down by demographics, by grade level, all sorts of, I mean, it's a plethora of information that they look at. This Texas Smart Schools and several other websites are looking at it differently, so.
Yes, sir.
Not all schools require the use of the STAR test, by example.
Right.
Rock is a good example. They require all students graduating to take the STAR test. Georgetown doesn't. How does your model adjust for that difference, or does it? Because if you've got 30% of your students that are graduated and going to college, then that's one of the big reasons they don't have to adjust. How does the model adjust to that, and how do you
I'm gonna refer to somebody here who, they seem to know more than I do.
If you want state money, you must take the end of course and STAR test, and I'm on the
Yes.
school board here at Georgetown.
GSD doesn't test?
No, we do, you could go to I don't know why he's telling me no, but the answer is yes, we do test all the kids. You have to.
I can back up Stephanie. All students are required to take the test. The pandemic did cause some interruptions to that. And the state didn't require students to take the test.
That's right, during the
If they were
pandemic.
learning remotely. And so
Right.
there are students who did not come to school to do that because there wasn't an electronic option for them to do so remotely. In
So
order
how
to
do you
take
adjust for
the
that?
test
Those-
during the pandemic, you had to report to school.
There was no accountability in 2020. They wanted to explain things for the whole state.
In 2019,
2020.
what happened in 2019?
2019 was still all.
Everybody had to take the test.
And there is something called the graduation committee. So for the end of course kids at the high school level, they take it several times. If they pass 3 out of the 5, they can, but they can't pass the last 2, they can go to a committee that can then look at the whole portfolio of the student and make a determination.
And how is that number incorporated?
That's a
I'm trying
very
to
good
get the
question.
statistics. I'm trying to get the statistics that Ms. Combs is referring to. I think it's very important to have that kind of information. And the question I have and raise is there truly an apples to apples comparison between the various schools? And is it incorporating it all in there? I looked, and I have gone to the website, it is very impressive, by the way. I did know, but I couldn't determine when I looked at GISD, for example, who the other,
You
comparisons were.
they'll show you, you put your cursor on, it'll tell you which school it is. You can find out.
Okay. When I tried it, it didn't work for me, so
You
I'll go back and try again.
Well, I've done it on my laptop, on my desktop. You hit on it, so it tells you who are the other, they don't have space for the writing,
Right.
but you punch it, it goes, whoop, there it is.
Oh,
Yeah, it'll pop up. Yes, sir.
Is there not a way for, someone, Texas Educational or whomever, to have a list of best practices and publicize that? I mean, yeah, you said it's hard, but they should be able to come up with best practices in your top school districts.
Well, I would ask Charlotte,
I'm sorry, I could not hear.
does TDA have a list of best practices? And
Yeah, they do.
They do, okay.
There's quite a bit of information on the website about the most effective research-based practices that yield.
And TDA has very Principal Resources, there are people called PSPs, which stands for what, Charlotte?
It's a professional service provider.
So TEA can
They
send,
used to use.
They what?
They used to provide professional service providers.
They used
for
to.
school districts.
and they don't anymore?
What they've done is they put the accountability, monitoring and, sanctions more onto the school districts themselves, so that they have to, monitor their own improvement.
Charlotte was here as a PSP at GISD. Because TEA sent her here because of performance issues.
And now they don't do that anymore?
No,
They do have, the Region Service Centers provide, they provide support systems and training, but most of the work is put back on the school district to generate, their reports and data and to monitor their progress.
and that brings me back though to sort of the third-party vetting. I truly believe in that.
Yeah.
And it's hard to really accurately look at yourself. I mean, if I do the selfie on my phone, I hate what I see. I turn it back off. It's selfie, so it's pretty easy to fix that. Give me the dim light and the rosy bulbs. Yes, ma'am.
What do you think the significance and implications are of the growing number of elementary schools that are low performing in Georgia?
I think it's scary.
Growing
The growing number of elementary schools in GISD that are low performing, I think it's a scary trend. And I mean, I don't know what the rate has been, but if you've got a new year, another school's low performing, elementary, that's elementary, my dear Watson. I mean, that is elementary. If you're not getting those kids early, I think that's very, very scary, and I think you have to take a look at what's going on. And again, I would get third-party advice, counsel from somebody. And if TEA, I don't think TEA is gonna do that much anymore. I think you've gotta go outside to acknowledged experts and get really professional help that you're willing to pay for and bite the bullet.
Right.
Bite the bullet. I mean, you got to. This is, in some sense, this is really life and death for these kids. If their economic future is foreclosed by bad basic education, that takes me back to those 15-year-old kids with a 4th and 5th grade reading level in the late 70s. Come on. Ma'am?
Yes, and thank you for taking our questions. Does the district have any say in the modeling decisions, that are made, and was this data ever confirmed through GISD?
I don't know what contact has been made with GISD, so I don't know. I do know that the algorithms and the format of this have been vetted and peer reviewed, and they've been given. I know that the Commissioner of Higher Education is very, very much a fan of this. Harrison Keller. I know that the Hoover Institution at Stanford is. It's been vetted, and I have every confidence in it because they have peer reviewed it. But whether GISD has done anything with it, I am not advised.
It's the, if I understand, because I've gone to law schools, I understand the data that was used was data that was reported by each district into TEA.
Yeah.
So that's where the data comes from. It's the data that's reported.
It's the
by
school's
each
data.
district into TEA, and then the A&M and the individuals who use the data from there to show.
You initially mentioned about the schools with smaller classroom and how well they did. So is there data to demonstrate that the size of the classroom and the individual attention has an impact on the improvement?
See, here's what I think it's a great question. And you know what I'd do? I'd pick up the telephone and I'd call Round Rock. And I'd say, what's your class size? And sort of, what?
Do you know that? You have that information.
I don't have Round Rock's class sizes. No, I don't.
Well, not just Round Rock, but.
So what? So
Not just Round Rock, but in general.
I don't have it.
Okay.
I don't have it. Sir?
Well, yes,
very easily understood.
So, so what they do is they take all of these factors, such as class size, such as school size, district, location, and that's the whole strength of this model, is that it takes into more data points into account. It can even account for their participation in orchestra or sports, whether they eat breakfast or not. So they take all of these and put them into a algorithm, of which I don't understand because I'm not a statistician, but that's where they get these, I would say that we're nearing, it's a better measure for identifying whether or not these children are performing at the same level, because you cannot compare a child who's getting $9,000 to a child who's getting $4,000 in instruction. You can't compare the two. And so they account for all these things in their analysis, and that's just what I read from the website.
So you're saying the amount of money equals quality?
No, that's just one, so that's just one data point. One data point.
Yeah.
Class size is another data point.
Sure.
This goes to the same question I raised earlier, but it's in a little bit different, thing. Third grade, teaching English, getting kids involved in reading, getting kids involved in math, absolutely critical to success downstream. And I think that measure is superbly valuable. I go forward with your dollar assessment, and I look at high school, and I look at the trade school education. There are excellent schools that do a lot of it, and there are schools that don't do a lot.
Right.
How does the model adjust for those differences? Now, a third grader in
Let me stop you right there. The model is not going to account for whether you do welding later on. It's K through 12.
that's what I'm asking.
It's
about.
not.
How do we take the dollar value, say $9,000 or $8,000?
I don't know how you take it.
Between third graders and the high schools who are going to use a lot more. Georgetown, by example, has an aviation program. They have a 3D modeling program. They have all sorts of things in the educational process, which are expensive, but they produce students that have a degree to go out and actually go to work literally from day one. So I'm curious about.
Let me just say, I'm a fan of four-year colleges, and some kids aren't gonna go. I'm a big fan of post-high school certificates and training because you can get a job. But I'm also a big fan of students being able to read and compute and write. They gotta be able to do reading, computing, and writing. And you can't understand a manual about a welding machine if you can't read it. So you have to have the basic acquisition, but what the improvement score is, if the school is not overall K through 12, if the ISD is showing that you're only better than 2% of all school districts in the state, that includes the babies. They're not in welding classes yet, they probably couldn't hold a torch. I'm just saying, what?
I'm sorry, you go.
No, I'm just ranting.
Also, the college career military readiness is a score that you can find on TEA that shows for every school district that takes into accountability the students who are college ready, the students who are going to the military, and the students that are career ready. So the programs in GISD that are producing career ready students, that has factored into that measure and you can find for any school district and any school. I don't know if it's factored into your analysis, but it is data that is available.
Barbara?
You know, I'm new to this, to Georgetown, and I just wonder if our children in Georgetown failing? I mean, are they not going to college? Are they not graduating from college? You know, I look back in, when I was in school, and some of the school districts or some of the individual school principals would say, we're not going to teach to the SAT, that's back then, as we were taking it, we're going to teach a different way. And then maybe students didn't do as well on the SAT score. And we look at our own children and say the same thing. Does a poor score on a test reflect how well my child is going to do in the future? And so translate that to a school district. Is the school district failing?
Well, I would say it it's failing all but 2%. It's below 98% of the schools in the state, who all have the exact same issues, Barbara.
If your school district said, we're gonna use the Montessori method to teach all our grade school, those students might not do as well on a standardized test, and yet they would have success in the future.
They can do as well, if you align the curriculum, if you align the Montessori curriculum with the teams. That's what every school district should be doing, regardless of what the curriculum is. It just needs to be aligned with the teams, and then teams can perform on the spot. That's the bottom line.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, as long as we're talking about the TEA, I find it very interesting over the years to go to the TEA website and find out what are the minimum requirements for a high school diploma in Texas and what constitutes a certificate of graduation. And I think some of you, if you haven't gone there, might be amazed. We're talking math, I'm a math person. It used to be high school, Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2. All of a sudden, they're giving math credits for, they label it consumer math or something, where you write checks or figure out tax. Now, I just think, I'm not saying right or wrong, but when we're talking about graduation rates, you have to look at what does a high school diploma need.
I think that's a fair question.
I just have a history question. What year, you may have said it, what year did you actually have Texas Smart Schools up and running and working? And the second part is, do you have any idea how, is there anybody that tracks how many districts are hits or
what? How many
usage,
districts?
what the usage has been like
Oh, well, I can.
over that period?
Lori
of time?
Taylor would know, because she controls the website in Texas A&M, so Dr. Taylor would know what kind of, acquisition, I have no idea. Back to when we started, the predecessor to Texas Smart Schools FAST, Lori and I got to work on that in 2007 and 8, we probably launched that in about 2008, and then I retired in 2014, and then I went ahead and donated about 5 years worth of funds for my campaign, for Lori to keep doing it. I told her the runway was not perpetual, but that she needed to go get outside funding, which she has done. And so it became Texas Smart Schools in 2015. That it was a seamless flow from FAST. Well, it just was modifications. And schools have been able to say, hey, Dr. Taylor, we think you're missing something here. Let's discuss a tweak. That's what you do. I will give you one other similar example, then I'll let you go. I wanted to do a cost comparison of school construction. Well, that set the cat among the pigeons. And I graded them all. It was a nightmare. And so I got no data that didn't come from the school. And I asked them to give me, how much did it cost you to build this elementary school? How many square feet? And how many students? Crazy numbers, right? So there was and I didn't make this up, I just plugged it in. There was a kindergarten in Austin, which I fondly called Taj Mahal for tots. And, it was incredibly expensive. So it was a big lens. San Antonio ISD was very, very high spending per square foot, and they were very happy with that. Go look up some schools in the northeast of Houston, very efficient. They use models. They use sort of rote things. They saved a bunch of money delivering very nice schools, but the delta between the high spend per square foot and the low spend per square foot did not produce any appreciable educational outcomes. In some cases they had, not patchwork bricks. It's very expensive to lay bricks on an angle. So some of the schools had these beautiful exteriors. Well, they didn't have any better bathrooms. They didn't have any better water fountains. So all I'm saying is the data is what it is it comes in from the school district. So whether it's construction or whether it's the scores, it's from the schools. I have got to go. I'm gonna go back and terrorize my hubby. My Saturday task is to do that, but thank you all for coming and listening.